I hope we'll be able to see people of all incomes able to live in all areas of our city without exclusion from currently wealthier and majority white neighborhoods, and really overcoming this legacy of redlining. Seeing a welcoming city that makes room for its neighbors, especially nearby the amenities that people want and need. So the concept of a 15-minute city is not a new one. We're building a city where people can easily walk, bike, and roll from work to home, grocery stores, childcare, schools, parks, small businesses, libraries, healthcare, and regional transit. And I think that's a beautiful vision, and one that I hope we're playing a role in with the work that we're doing now on the comprehensive plan.
Today, we're exploring how Seattle is approaching housing and planning for growth. And I'm joined by Seattle City Council Member Rinck to share her perspectives on expanding attainable housing options. Hello, Councilmember Rinck. Thanks for coming on with us today.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Hi, I'm Vonette. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're super excited to interview you, Councilmember Rinck.
It's good to be here. Nice to meet you, Vonette.
So, Seattle recently passed its comprehensive plan through the One Seattle framework. As the city moves into implementation, what feels most important for people to understand about how the city is approaching housing?
Absolutely. Well, I keep joking to folks, the comprehensive plan is probably the most consequential 1,000-page document you could imagine when we're talking about the future of our city. And we're finally starting to allow growth outside of a few small areas in our city, because too long we have concentrated growth in areas like downtown, Capitol Hill, the U District, and the Rainier Valley. And after the passage of the comp plan, we've actually added 30 new neighborhood centers. So allowing low-rise and mid-rise housing to be built in formerly single-family areas. And these neighborhood centers will be spread throughout the city. So including places that haven't seen a lot of growth, but have a lot of opportunity. So we're talking about North Magnolia, Ravenna, Bryant, Maple Leaf, Madison Park, Madrona, and Fauntleroy, just to name a few. Historically, these are neighborhoods across the city that have been successful in pushing out new housing, but that's no longer the case. And for the areas that aren't designated as a center, we're allowing for more middle housing in formerly single-family areas. Some may know House Bill 1110, missing middle. We've gone above and beyond what House Bill 1110 has done by allowing for stacked flats up to 4 floors, which can accommodate up to 8 or more units per lot. And that in combination by allowing neighborhood commercial or corner stores across the city represents a real shift away from single-family neighborhoods of the past towards a denser and more affordable city for all. So I'm really proud of the work we were able to do on the comp plan. It was a long process and one that required a lot of community conversation, but it's exciting where we've landed, and we still have a lot of work ahead of us.
Got it. So expanding on that, so how does expanding housing types like ADUs and middle housing contribute to more attainable housing across the city?
I love this question because accessibility is so important, especially for those aging in place or for people who are living with disabilities. The norm in Seattle has been townhome construction, which, as you may know, requires climbing multiple flights of stairs to get from your front door to your kitchen to your bedroom. This is why we are so excited about stacked flats, which will allow for units to be wholly located on a single floor. And the vast majority of our smaller buildings don't have elevators, which can provide more ADA accessible units on the first floor of these stacked flats for those who may need them. I also want to celebrate for a moment a bill that just came out of the state legislature this past session to support small elevator construction, which I think really complements the work that the city is doing to realize more stacked flat development. But I also want to touch on ADUs, because we know that ADUs offer a straightforward way for families to stick together, and putting the backyard of a single family home can really open up the ability for parents, adult children, or other loved ones to live nearby and have some independence. And so we were excited to champion a few amendments to support more ADU construction in the comp plan. And so really excited to realize and support more ADU development in the city, because we know that they can offer economic stability, a possible source of income for when the homeowner wants to rent it out. It can just be a great benefit for those across the city.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. When discussing housing that is more attainable over time, what planning approaches or tools can help support that goal?
Well, zoning is a huge tool that the city can leverage to allow for more housing, which we know lowers the cost of housing by lessening the pressure on demand. Other tools at our disposal include streamlining permitting. For any construction project, we know that time is money, and when you're waiting on the city to break ground, and when I say waiting on the city, we hear too often from folks, and I'm not even just talking big developers, we're talking about folks who just want to build an ADU in their backyard, but first they got to go talk to City Light, then they got to go talk to the Seattle Department of Transportation. They need to be working through SDCI, the Seattle Department of Construction and Inspections. We put the onus on many folks who are just trying to build housing to navigate our complicated city system. So we are doing work and really interested in finding ways to just streamline that process, make it easier so we're not wasting time, which ultimately adds cost to projects. So we really want to streamline that process so folks can really advance to the next stage of construction, open doors, and really build the housing that we need. So we're working on improving interdepartmental communication and standard timelines to permit issuance to provide that stability and reliability and just better communication to builders.
Gotcha. How is the city improving clarity and predictability in zoning and permitting while maintaining community and environmental standards?
So we know that by building densely, especially near transit, we're building in a more economically and environmentally sustainable way. We know that when prices rise due to a lack of supply, people are forced to move further and further away from community and economic opportunity and the services that people need, which is leading to sprawl, and sprawl is leading to deforestation, destruction of farmland, and over-reliance on single occupancy cars, which we know actually in Seattle, transportation is contributing to about 60% of our emissions, obviously harming the environment and polluting the air. So by building more housing in Seattle, we can support in our efforts to against displacing folks, but we can also allow folks to live more sustainably and arguably more affordably. Ideally, we're complementing this housing strategy with also supporting our transportation efforts as well. And so ideally, folks are able to walk or get to work on bus or on light rail and be able to afford to stay in the city. But another way that we've prioritized the environment is through our urban tree canopy. We've provided tree planting and retention bonuses for new middle housing. We've added height and floor area ratio and parking elimination incentives for trees and higher green factor scores. This allows us to provide a carrot rather than a stick approach, and it really gives us a win-win: more housing, more nature for a project that decides to opt into these to qualify for these bonuses.
Perfect. So we know Seattle is very densely populated, and as it plans for growth, how does the city align housing with the transit, utilities, and neighborhood infrastructure?
Yeah. So we know that, well, it's important to note that without development, we as the city also need that development to have the revenues to upgrade these services. And we do a lot of our transportation planning efforts based on where we're also planning our growth. So these are intimately tied efforts. And to develop a project, permit fees, taxes, and the infrastructure improvements required, all of which benefit the city. On top of that, we know that developers are often required to upgrade surrounding infrastructure. This can include the addition of a repair of a sidewalk, underground water and sewer pipe upgrades, new electrical hookups, street and frontage improvements, and more. And so that's one part in terms of just supporting neighborhood infrastructure. We on the city side, of course, are monitoring, and we have a number of city departments that handle city infrastructure, and we have our transportation levy through Seattle Department of Transportation. I think we have an incredible benefit as a city of having a public utility like Seattle City Light, and so Seattle City Council actually serves as the utility board for this essentially public electrical company. And so we're through those separate departments too, we are also working on just broader infrastructure improvements to these public goods so everyone can benefit, especially as our city grows. And on the issue of transit access, we're allowing for new low-rise housing up to 5 floors along our frequent bus corridors. And we're going to be implementing the state transit-oriented development bill as soon as next year, which will see major up zones near our Link light rail stations and the rapid ride stops. So very excited about that.
Thanks for sharing. Looking ahead 10 years, if these strategies are working well, what might we see in Seattle neighborhoods that reflect that progress?
Oh, that's a beautiful question, and one that sometimes in the day-to-day of doing the work, we're talking about high level policy, we're talking about code, we're talking like it can feel very wonky and very divorced from people's lives. But when I take a step back and think about the Seattle we want to be in 10 years, I hope we'll be able to see people of all incomes able to live in all areas of our city without exclusion from currently wealthier and majority white neighborhoods, and really overcoming this legacy of redlining. Seeing a welcoming city that makes room for its neighbors, especially nearby the amenities that people want and need. So the concept of a 15-minute city is not a new one. We're building a city where people can easily walk, bike, and roll from work to home, grocery stores, childcare, schools, parks, small businesses, libraries, healthcare, and regional transit. And I think that's a beautiful vision, and one that I hope we're playing a role in with the work that we're doing now on the comprehensive plan.
Love it, love it. So, as a lifelong Washington, Seattle area resident, I love to hear that and see the city grow and mature and change and pivot. But let's talk about you. So, can you share a little bit more about your background and the path that led you into public service?
Oh my gosh. Thank you. Thank you for that. It's been quite a journey. I am a big believer that the personal is political, and so it's hard not to talk about my personal story when I talk about my path into politics. And I am proudly raised by my grandparents. I was born to teenagers who had been caught in cycles of homelessness and substance use disorder. But I am quite literally here today because of great investments in my community. And by great investments, I mean public libraries, community centers, a really great public school with teachers who saw me and intervened when I needed, because I was a kiddo with a lot of trauma that I was carrying with me. And it was those interventions in my community and having trusted adults around me who knew my story and frankly just having things to do after school that tended to my emotional health, my physical health. All of those things helped put me on a much better trajectory. And so seeing those investments firsthand, that's why I'm fighting for those kind of investments for all of our neighbors, because I do feel like I stand here as a living testament to when we invest in young people and working families, regardless of their beginnings, we can quite literally change generations. And so in that upbringing, when I went off to college, I studied political science and sociology and got minors in women and gender studies and Spanish. So actually lived briefly in Santiago, Chile, and studied dictatorships. Really helpful for understanding the moment that we're in as we are facing authoritarianism here in the US. But I got really involved in organizing efforts as well. And so started with consumer protection work, fighting homelessness, but I ultimately got pulled into this fight against money in politics. Because ultimately, all the issues that we care about, whether it be reproductive health care access, climate justice, homelessness, the policies that ultimately get passed, especially on the federal level, are at the whims of who's funding our politicians and our elected leaders. And so I got really involved in fighting for campaign finance reform, like can we find a way to have more publicly funded elections? And after graduating from Syracuse University, that's when I came to Seattle to get my master's in public administration at the University of Washington, because I was really interested in transferring those skills from organizing into policy work. And following that, I started work alongside jurisdictions around the region. So I worked for the Sound Cities Association and really cut my teeth on working with suburban jurisdictions on a whole range of issues, from housing, from human services matters. And I was supporting a lot of the work on getting funding and resources and just the policy work for many jurisdictions in the midst of the pandemic. So working with King County Public Health in the midst of the pandemic to get information out so folks knew how they could get vaccinations, how to socially distance, all of those things. So I've done a lot of work with cities. I then spent some time working regionally on homelessness. And then things really came full circle when I decided to take the jump and run for public office. And I'll close by noting it feels full circle because Seattle is very special in how we run our city council races and how we fund them. We are one of the only cities in the country that has a form of public financing of elections through our Democracy Vouchers program. And so when we talk about getting money out of politics, Seattle's trying it out. And we've had this program now for, like almost a decade, if not more. It is more, actually. But, and so it's been interesting now to have been a Democracy Voucher candidate, to have run my election with the Democracy Voucher program, and still being really committed to getting money out of politics, and now holding this office, which is a tremendous honor to do. So that's just a little bit about like background, how we got here, and it's been one of the greatest honors of my life to serve in this office.
So I understand you have a connection with the University of Washington you mentioned. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how it may impact or influence your work today?
Absolutely. Well, I'm a proud graduate of the Evans School of Public Policy, and that is where I got my master's degree. It was, an incredible experience. I had the opportunity to learn from so many talented practitioners and researchers, both in terms of public budgeting and financial practices, but also in terms of just the policy. And one of the big policy outcomes I was able to work on, or policy elements I was able to work on, was a policy memo that actually went to then Mayor Durkin, focused on vehicle residency. And for those who don't know, vehicle residency is the term that we use to describe people experiencing homelessness who are sleeping out of cars, vans, or RVs. And our homelessness response system does not have the tools. It is not really structured to reach those folks. It's been an ongoing policy concern and challenge, and one that I had the opportunity to take a stab at in grad school, and alongside, who was it? One of my professors who, oh my gosh, I cannot believe her name is escaping me right now. It'll probably come to me after we're done with our podcast. It'll come to me, but had the opportunity to work alongside her and a few local practitioners, actually a PhD student who was getting their PhD in anthropology, to put forward a policy memo for the mayor, which was pretty incredible. And it feels even more surreal that now I'm here in City Hall, still talking about and working on vehicle residency solutions, but proud to say we've moved the needle forward. We now have safe parking programs and safe parking lot programs, which was one of our policy recommendations from back when I was in grad school. And now coming into this moment, I talked a little bit earlier about my experience working regionally. I did a lot of work with cities, but right before running for office, I actually was working at UW's Office of Planning and Budgeting, and I was working for the team that essentially does the fiscal notes for the university. So we were working on a lot of state policy matters, and was deep in the 2023-2024 state legislative session, doing bill analysis. I think I read 600 bills for the university that year, and did at least 20 fiscal notes. And it was through that process I got to know and come to understand just how expansive the work of the University of Washington really does, beyond just educating the next generation of leaders, both in terms of undergrad and graduate students, but also just the amount of research that's coming out of the institution, the incredible work of the facilities team, even just understanding more about the world of sports at the university. There's so much happening at the UW, and I'm just really proud to be a Husky.
Go dogs! And we all are here, and you talk about the next generation of leadership is looking good. Vonette has been. She had me 3 times as an instructor. Now she's my TA. So I don't know how lucky she gets. Maybe she, but I'm sure your professors were proud of you. I'm proud of what she's doing. But the UW does so much good work. I'm happy to be affiliated with it. But let's move on. So now tell us a bit about your work, your current role, work with the city council, and what that typically involves.
Yeah. What's a typical day in City Hall? I always joke that every day is an adventure in City Hall because no 2 days are alike. In a very official sense, I chair over a few different committees. I chair over our Human Services, Labor, and Economic Development Committee, as well as a select committee on federal administration and policy changes. The tip here is that select committee on federal administration and policy changes didn't quite exist a couple years ago. This is a new committee that council has, frankly, in response to the Trump regime's second term in office and the havoc that they've caused across the country. Is having major ramifications for local jurisdictions, such that it necessitates full committee time to unpack and have working committee time to be problem solving around all of these changes. That has become a surprisingly huge body of work for city council members. We're all monitoring the headlines, working with our Office of Intergovernmental Relations to really unpack what a Trump tweet means or a Trump executive order means for jurisdictions. And the impacts are profound. Beyond just a funding sense, the policy changes that take jurisdictions like ours potentially out of, disqualify us from getting different kinds of federal funds for our emergency response. As far as I know, we never, despite qualifying for FEMA funds for a windstorm that took power out of the city last year, we have yet to get that check in the mail, things like that. And that certainly requires council attention. So between those two committees, we definitely have our hands full. We are very clear-eyed that we want to make sure we're meeting our community's needs, continuing to support economic development and support workers' rights while navigating this turbulent time. Additionally, I serve as vice chair on the Transportation, Waterfront, and Seattle Center Committee. So keeping a strong focus on transportation. And we have of course, we all love the new waterfront. I think a real testament to the fact that we can do big things as a city when we stay committed and really do the hard work of problem solving the challenges ahead of us. And so there's the formal committee work. Of course, I'm a member of a number of different committees, including our land use committee, our libraries, education, and neighborhoods committee, housing and arts and civil rights. And so there's the formal committee work. We take up a lot of the like legislative work happens in committees. So sometimes folks will say, full council is usually, it's very procedural, but committees are where a lot of the work happens. When something's making it to full council, we're at the end. When that council vote is happening, we're at the end of a legislative process, and then it heads over to the executive branch for implementation, where we'll continue to monitor on the council side. But that is the official legislative work. Beyond that, my days are filled with working with constituents, working with our partners, sitting down, having meetings. We're sitting down with our central staff, analyzing different policy options, reading, and then being out in community. I try to make sure that my team, we call ourselves the People's Office, and I don't say that as though we've arrived, but rather as like an ongoing commitment. And when I say that we are the People's Office, what I mean by that are kind of these three major A's. That's the framework I think of it. That first A being accessibility. We need to be accessible to people, whether it be over email or showing up, or people need to know how to reach us. The second piece is accountability. And so I think it's fair to say everyone isn't going to love every vote that I take. because it's impossible. We're not a consensus city. We all have our differences, even when we're in the same political factions. But I do think it's important that we're accountable for the work that we do, and that means clearly communicating why we're taking the steps that we are, whether it be an approach that we take or ultimately a vote that I cast, being accountable to that. And then lastly, action. Like, people sent me here to do this job. In my most recent election, I got 81% of the vote. And so I take that as a strong vote of confidence and a clear mandate. And now people expect me to follow through on what I said I was going to do. And so that is really how we move through my office. And just a little bit about how I spend my days, despite no 2 days being alike.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for everything that you've done for the city of Seattle. I'm curious, is there a policy initiative or project you've worked on that you're especially proud of?
Oh, yes. There's so much I'm proud of from my first year in office. I want to highlight, and maybe I'll highlight this one because it matches much of our conversation on housing, and it's our Roots to Roofs pilot program. This was a piece of legislation that was workshopped over a number of years. It went through different names, different iterations, but it was really community driven. And ultimately, at its heart, the Roots to Roofs program, it's a pilot program meant to incentivize community-led affordable housing production by providing height and FAR bonuses. So floor area ratio bonuses. The pilot is going until 2035, or once 35 qualified projects have applied, whichever comes first. I would also note that the bonus is citywide, but there's an additional bonus in areas that have historically racially restrictive covenants. So really trying to find the tools that we have on the city to try and, again, remedy like our city's racist zoning history. And so in the initial stakeholdering of this and in the initial work with partners, I think it's important to note that many of the community-based organizations that are by and for in our communities oftentimes have started their work out of somebody's house, somebody's single family house that they have in the neighborhood. And we've seen so many small organizations that do really important work, do the work out of that house. And so now, given that we're in the midst and the throes of such a severe housing crisis, so many of these organizations want to make more use of the property that they have, start re-envisioning what the property could be used for, build housing, maybe first floor community space. And so we want to be able to create that opportunity. And with the rise in construction costs and everything facing development, we know that there were a number of projects that really are at the precipice of being able to go forward, but we're having trouble penciling. So by allowing for this additional density bonus to be able to add a floor, this is actually helping projects be able to go forward. And the first day that we opened applications, we had 4 organizations apply. And so I don't have up-to-date numbers. We just opened those applications, but I think that's a really exciting sign that we've done something meaningful and more housing is coming online. And so I'm just really proud of that. And special shout out to Caden on my team who worked so hard to bring this over the finish line. Again, this was policy started by council members that preceded me. So shout out to Councilmember Morales as well for her work on this. But I'm so glad that we got it over the finish line, and it's going to have real impacts. It already is.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. And if you could share one piece of advice for students like myself who's interested in civic leadership or public service, what would it be?
Oh, I appreciate this question. There's so much I wish I could tell my younger self, but I'm going to hone in on one phrase that has a lot tied to it. And the phrase is, no one person knows everything, but together we know a lot. And by together we know a lot, this is my encouragement to every person considering civic leadership or public service to reach out to experts in the field or people doing the work in the city level and ask for that coffee. I think in so many ways, networking gets a bad rap. It's seen as transactional, what have you. I don't view it that way. And I think that if we took back networking to be an exercise in building your knowledge network, building a base of people who are experts and implementers and in their own right. That is what has helped me more as someone in public service than anything. I've had so many coffee dates over the years or sit downs with, a program manager over a nutrition program randomly over the years, or someone who works in sewer and wastewater management. There have been so many policy matters that have come before me as a council member, and I don't know everything, but since I've built enough of a knowledge network around me, I know people to call, even to say, hey, I'm facing this sewer management policy. I recall that you work on sewer management. What can you tell me about this? And who could you connect me with to tell me more? No one person knows everything, but together we know a lot. And I think it's worthwhile to spend your time starting to build relationships with smart people. We have so many brilliant people here in the Seattle area, especially at the University of Washington, who are experts in their own right, who in my experience are dying to tell you what they know. And so I always encourage folks, like, if there's somebody that you admire, or if there's some program, some policy area that you're interested in just knowing about, it is always worth the investing your time and spending time with people who are doing that work. You never know 5 years from now where you're like, oh gosh, I need to make a decision about this policy that I don't know enough about, but I had coffee with somebody years ago that does. I'm going to call that person. It still shocks me how many times that comes up. And so I think that would be one piece of advice. Come into your knowledge networking with a lot of humility, because again, no one person knows everything, but together we do know a lot.
Great advice. Thank you so much for that. Next, is there a book that has significantly influenced your thinking or leadership approach?
Oh my gosh. Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. And I offer that. It's not a traditional management book. That was the book that made me have courage and made me realize that there is power and importance in being vulnerable. Vulnerability is really uncomfortable. And I think at that stage, before I read that book, I always just saw myself as somebody like, I'm the behind the scenes person. I'm just doing things. I'm not the person out front. I'm not, I was very much making myself small because I just wanted to be a good team player. But I would find myself feeling a lot of resentment for, people who I was working with, or even, the leaders around me, for not taking a stand, not doing, implementing the change that really needed to be done, and feeling some resentment towards that. And Dare to Lead was one of those books that made me realize that to live the life and to sometimes make the change that you want to see happen, you have to be the one that's going to do it. And it requires vulnerability. It requires courage requires vulnerability, and that can feel really uncomfy, but it's a necessary thing. And I feel like it was the book that helped me start taking chances and start putting myself out there. And for me, in coming where I came from, again, I was very, very timid and shy and unsure of myself. But if there was one thing I knew, was that I may have been unsure of myself, but I knew what I knew, which by that I mean, like, I knew my shit. Pardon my language. Sorry. I knew my policy areas. I knew the expertise that I had. And that was the book that kind of pushed me into thinking, well, why not put myself out there? Why not offer my ideas more candidly? What's the worst that can happen? And so that is one book that I definitely credit to kind of changing my life path. I've continued to follow kind of the Brene Brown management principles too. I really try to I really appreciate some of her other works as well, but that would be the main book that was life-changing for me.
Love it, love it. I'll have to add that to my Audible. I know I'm not going to get to read books until maybe summer break, but no, well, I mean, I love what you shared. I mean, there's so many people, so many students I think are going to listen to this, hear it, and see a part of themselves in you. I mean, I can look and see in certain students, like I said, I had Von as a student, natural leader, in my opinion, right? But there's other students that may take a while to step up. So as you're sharing how you did and went through things and networking and reaching out to people and getting involved. So if people would like to connect or with you, how's the best way for them to do that?
You for that. Would love if people would stay connected because I'm a big believer. I want you to be involved in local government. I think city, county government can be a force for real good. And we're doing a lot of really cool work at the city. So encourage folks to sign up for our newsletter. I promise it's an email that's worthwhile to read because we talk a lot about the policy work that we're doing. So we do our legislative updates, but we also talk about the work that's happening across the city. But if newsletters and emails are not your style, you can follow me on social media at Alexis Mercedes Rinck on my personal side or at Councilmember AMR, which is my official office Instagram. And so those two handles on most platforms will get you where you need to go. So would love if people would stay connected to our work and just really grateful for the opportunity to talk to you both today. Grateful for the Runstad School and just the partnership with the University of Washington.
Wonderful. Thanks for coming on today. Thanks for sharing your story. It was amazing.
Thank you so much. I learned so much from this interview, and I really appreciate you dedicating time for us to interview you today. And thank you so much for everything that you do for the city of Seattle. I'm so excited to see what you continue to do in the future.
Thanks, Vonette, and thank you, Jeff.